They called us Terrans, with such contempt in their multi-tonal voices. I remember the day they arrived. Towering figures with iridescent carapaces that seemed to absorb and refract light simultaneously. I was just a regular maintenance engineer on lunar outpost Callisto 7 when their mothership materialized above Earth's atmosphere, casting a shadow visible even from my station. The Vashrek, that's what they called themselves, had traveled across 17 galactic sectors to reach us. Not for peace, not for cultural exchange, but for consumption. Your planet has been selected as the next banquet world, announced their supreme harvester, Luxoma, during their first broadcast across all communication channels. Consider yourselves fortunate. Few species are worthy of nourishing the Vashrek dominion. I still recall how my supervisor, Officer Tanagra, collapsed upon hearing those words. She understood, before any of us, what it meant. The Vashrek were apex predators, driven by biological imperative to consume sentient life. Their digestive systems could only process neural tissue rich in what they called consciousness enzymes, the byproduct of advanced cognition. My name is Kaival Drenler. For years, I was nobody special, just another worker in humanity's expansion through the solar system. But on that day, as I watched our planetary defense systems fail within minutes against Vashrek technology, something changed in me. "They'll harvest us all," whispered Tanagra, her eyes wide with terror. The historical archives I accessed, planets they visited before, nothing remains but barren rock. The first harvesting ships descended to Earth within hours. Reports flooded in before communications went dark sector by sector. The Vashrek didn't just kill, they savored. Each human was categorized by neural complexity, emotional capacity, and creative potential. The most brilliant minds were reserved for their elders. Children were considered unripe and stored in stasis chambers for later consumption. When they reached Callisto 7, I was already gone. I'd stolen an experimental prototype stealth vessel from the research bay. Not out of heroism, pure survival instinct. I watched through the view screen as they methodically dismantled the outpost, sorting my colleagues by some invisible criteria. I expected pursuit, but none came. To the Vashrek, I was merely a single morsel that had fallen from their banquet table, hardly worth chasing. Their arrogance would become their undoing. As Earth's major cities fell, I drifted through the asteroid belt, desperately searching for other survivors. That's where I found her, the person who would change everything. Drifting in a damaged escape pod was Dr. Ilara Kethvala, Earth's leading xenobiologist, and the only human who had studied Vashrek physiology before the invasion. "They believe they're invincible," she told me after I brought her aboard, her voice hoarse from dehydration. "But every predator has weaknesses, and I know theirs." The Vashrek had made one critical mistake. They saw humans as mere food, delicacies to be consumed. They never considered us predators in our own right. They never imagined that their banquet might fight back. 6 months into the Vashrek occupation, Earth had become unrecognizable. From our hidden base in the craggy ravines of Europa, we monitored their methodical harvesting operations. The once vibrant blue planet now bore vast circular structures, feeding grounds where humans were processed and consumed in grotesque ceremonies. Dr. Kethvala's expertise proved invaluable. Before the invasion, she had obtained tissue samples from a dead Vashrek scout that had crashed in the Atacama Desert. Earth governments had classified the incident, but Ilara had kept her research hidden in quantum-encrypted files. "The Vashrek aren't just predators," she explained as we huddled around the holographic display in our makeshift lab. "They're symbiotic composites. Each individual hosts a collective of neural parasites that form a hive consciousness." Our small resistance grew as we rescued escape pods and evacuation ships. Melis Torvax, a former military strategist with modifications for enhanced tactical processing. The Volzoran, who had been Earth's foremost quantum engineer before losing his family to the first wave. And Quintara Helzak, a 17-year-old prodigy who had independently developed a cloaking system that could actually hide human neural signatures from Vashrek scanners. Their sensory apparatus is calibrated to detect emotional responses, Quintara explained, her fingers dancing across the control panel. Fear excites them most. It's their aperitif before the main course. We had our first real breakthrough when we captured a Vashrek scout ship. The pilot, a lower caste harvester named Kresnikar, became our reluctant source of intelligence after Alara discovered a neurotoxin that could selectively target the parasitic components of their biology. "You misunderstand the natural order," the creature hissed as Alara carefully extracted information. "Your species is uniquely delicious. Your capacity for hope, even in despair, creates neural pathways that nourish us beyond all other prey." What Kresnikar revealed changed everything. The Vashrek weren't merely feeding on human brains. They were absorbing our memories, experiences, and knowledge. Each consumed human added to their collective consciousness. They were becoming more human with every feast, assimilating our strengths while maintaining their predatory superiority. But this also meant they were inheriting our weaknesses. Our capacity for fear, yes, but also our capacity for self-destruction. They've never encountered a species that would rather die than be consumed, I realized during one strategy session. What if we weaponized that very human trait? Duvall modified the neurotoxin to create a cascading effect. If released into one Vashrek, it would travel through their symbiotic network, potentially affecting thousands. The plan was elegant, but required someone to infiltrate their main harvesting center on Earth. I volunteered immediately, not from courage, but from rage. The holographic images of Earth's transformation haunted my sleep. Cities replaced by processing centers. Oceans tainted purple from chemical runoff of their operations. The systematic extinction of everything I had ever known or loved. "You'll need this," Quintara said, handing me a neural dampener. "It will make you taste bland. Like an unripe specimen, they'll want to store rather than consume immediately." Before I departed, Alara grasped my hand, her eyes reflecting the dim blue light of Europa's ice ceilings. "Remember, Kaival, they think they're the apex predators of the galaxy. They've never considered that they might be prey." The harvesting center loomed before me, a grotesque monument to Vashrek gluttony. Once the sprawling metropolis of Neo-Shanghai, now its skyscrapers, had been repurposed into processing towers connected by pulsating organic matter that resembled intestinal tracts. The stench of fear and death permeated the air. My captured scout ship approached the receiving bay, broadcasting the identification codes we'd extracted from Kresnikar. The neural dampener attached to my cerebral cortex made me feel foggy, disconnected. But that was precisely the point. To the Vashrek, I would register as mentally underdeveloped, a specimen to be stored rather than immediately consumed. "Unscheduled return," boomed a voice as my ship docked. "Identify purpose and payload." "Specialized specimen recovery," I responded, mimicking the clipped speech patterns of lower caste Vashrek. "Isolated outlier with unique neural configuration. Priority directive from Sector Harvester Nextvalter." Using the names of high-ranking Vashrek was risky, but their hierarchical society meant lower ranks rarely questioned orders from above. The massive holding bay doors parted, revealing the horror within. Thousands of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a human suspended in gelatinous preservation fluid. Their eyes were open but unseeing, conscious enough to generate the fear chemicals the Vashrek craved, but immobilized to prevent self-harm that would spoil the meat. A processing officer approached, towering over me. Its central-like complex swiveled to examine my disguise, a patchwork of Vashrek exoskeletal plates Alara had fashioned from the remains of our captive. "Your outer chitin displays irregularities," it noted suspiciously. "Battle damage," I responded. "Resistance encounter in Quadrant 7. The specimen fought unexpectedly." The officer's sensory appendages fluttered, the Vashrek equivalent of approval. "The fighters always taste more complex. Proceed to Assessment Chamber 3. I wheeled my stasis pod, containing the delivery system for our weapon, through corridors lined with nightmare fuel. Vashrek of various castes moved purposefully, some carrying specialized feeding tools. Others guided floating platforms bearing humans categorized by colored markers on their foreheads. Red for immediate consumption, blue for breeding stock, green for long-term storage. Assessment Chamber 3 was mercifully empty. I sealed the door and worked quickly, accessing the central ventilation system. The neurotoxin would spread through the environmental controls, affecting every Vashrek in the complex within hours. From there, returning harvesters would carry it to other centers, and eventually to the mothership itself. As I prepared the dispersal mechanism, a soft tapping caught my attention. From within a nearby stasis pod, a young man was somehow fighting through the paralytic field, his finger weakly tapping against the transparent barrier. His eyes locked with mine in desperate communication. With a silent apology to Alara for the deviation from our plan, I approached his pod and checked the control panel. Prisoner 11,783. Designated for elder consumption due to his exceptional creative neural patterns. According to his profile, he was or had been Tariq Mozafi, an architect who had designed self-sustaining habitats throughout Earth's challenging environments. I released him from stasis, catching his body as the preservation gel drained away. "You're human," he gasped, throat raw from disuse. "How?" "Resistance," I whispered. "We're fighting back. Can you walk?" He nodded weakly. "Others save others." "There's no time," I insisted. "The toxin." A blaring alarm cut through our whispers. On the screens above, I saw our Europa base under attack. Somehow, they had found us. Quintara's cloaking technology had failed or been betrayed. "No," I breathed, watching helplessly as Vashrek harvesting ships descended on our last sanctuary. "They knew," Tariq whispered as we watched the assault on Europa. "They've always known." A booming voice echoed through the facility. "Attention, all harvesters. The resistance nest has been located. Supreme Elder Luxoma will personally oversee the special feeding ceremony. All ranking officers report to Collection Deck Alpha." In that moment, I understood our fatal error. Kresnikar hadn't been our prisoner. We had been his experiment. The Vashrek had allowed us to develop our toxin, to believe we had a chance, all to enhance the fear chemicals that would make the final feast more satisfying. But they had miscalculated human ingenuity. "The ventilation system," I muttered, suddenly understanding. "It's not just for air." Tariq nodded grimly. "It's how they transmit pheromones and control signals to their neural parasites. I designed similar systems before they came." With renewed purpose, we modified the plan. Instead of simply releasing the toxin, we reconfigured it to carry Quintara's neural signature cloaking frequency. If we couldn't kill the Vashrek immediately, we could at least blind them, make every human appear invisible to their specialized senses. As we worked frantically, the first transport ships returned from Europa, carrying our captured comrades. Through the chamber windows, we watched as they were paraded before assembled Vashrek dignitaries. Alara, Melis, Vavol, Quintara, all tagged with the red markers of immediate consumption. "Now," I said, activating the dispersal system. The modified toxin hissed into the ventilation network, invisible but carrying our last hope. For several agonizing minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then a Vashrek ceremonial feeder froze mid-stride, its sensory appendages twitching frantically. It turned in a complete circle, suddenly confused. "Where?" it chittered. "Where did they go?" One by one, the assembled Vashrek began moving erratically, unable to detect their human prizes. Chaos erupted as the effect spread. Supreme Elder Luxoma, an enormous Vashrek with a phosphorescent crest, roared in frustration. "Find them. They cannot have disappeared." In the confusion, we freed our comrades. Quintara's eyes widened when she saw what we'd done. "You broadcast my cloaking frequency through their own network," she breathed. "Brilliant." But our victory was short-lived. The Vashrek, though unable to sense humans directly, began systematically destroying everything in their path. What they couldn't consume, they would eradicate. That's when Alara revealed her final gambit. "Their neuroparasites don't just facilitate their consciousness," she explained hurriedly as we retreated through the chaos. They are their consciousness, and they're connected in a hive network vulnerable to signal reprogramming. She produced a crystalline device, her original research, hidden and developed in secret even from us. This will rewrite their core directive. Instead of consuming sentient beings, they'll consume each other, finished Thoval with grim satisfaction. We fought our way to the central control nexus, where the Vashrek coordinated their global harvesting operation. Melis and I held off frenzied Vashrek guards, while Alara and Quintara worked to integrate their device into the transmission array. As the signal activated, the effect was both horrifying and magnificent. The Vashrek froze as one, then turned on each other with predatory intensity. What had been an organized harvesting force became a cannibalistic feeding frenzy. The Supreme Elder Luxoma was the first target, swarmed by his own honor guard, their feeding appendages tearing through his iridescent exoskeleton. "We need to broadcast this to every Vashrek ship and facility," Alara shouted over the sounds of Chidina's bodies breaking apart. Within hours, the signal had spread worldwide, then to orbiting ships, and finally to the mothership itself. The Vashrek civilization, built on consuming others, consumed itself in a poetic conclusion to their reign of terror. 3 months later, Earth's recovery began in earnest. The remaining human population emerged from hiding to reclaim their world. The Vashrek structures were dismantled, their technology repurposed for rebuilding. Standing on a cliff overlooking the reclaimed ruins of Neo-Shanghai, I watched as Tarek directed reconstruction efforts. His architectural vision, once nearly lost to the Vashrek appetite, now shaped humanity's rebirth. "They never understood what they were harvesting," Ilara remarked, joining me at the overlook. "Human consciousness isn't just about neural complexity or emotional capacity. It's about connection," I finished. "Our strength was never in individual minds, but in what we create together." In the end, the most feared killers in existence had indeed found Earth to be their banquet, just not in the way they had intended. They had feasted on themselves, undone by the very predatory nature they had evolved to perfect. And humanity, their intended meal, had proven to be something else entirely. Not prey, but fellow predators with teeth of their own.